Donald Trump clearly confirmed that Vladimir Putin is the boss. President Trump conceded to every single requirement from the Russian president. They both want lasting peace in Ukraine, which means that a peace agreement must be signed and a temporary ceasefire would be insufficient. Meanwhile, Russian armed forces made Ukrainian forces evacuate Odessa to reinforce Donbass. However, the populations of Donbass and other regions in eastern Ukraine had their populations previously vote for Russian annexation, which means that it is highly unlikely that they will ever go back to Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been summoned into Washington, D.C. next Monday so that he will be lectured by Donald Trump on the details of his capitulation, because Vladimir Putin will not sign a peace agreement with Volodymyr Zelensky because he is an illegitimate dictator, as has already been amply said by both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The European Union might be hysterical, however, they are unable to do anything beyond just watching at the sidelines. The New World Order is such that Donald Trump privileges meeting at a high level with all dictatorships of the planet for rare earth and petroleum deals. That has been the case with the presidents of Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, North Korea, and it is likely that next on the list would be Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, as the only ships that can freely traverse the Caribbean Sea from shore to shore are Chevrons and Valeros oil tankers conducting business as usual. 4,000 Marines are being deployed by the United States on Caribbean international waters, while Venezuela is also deploying its marine fleet into domestic Venezuelan waters. Colombia is supposed to support, and the Caribbean islands, which are well known for peace, are unlikely to support any militarization of the peaceful Caribbean Sea. Guyana's election is trying to add some uncertainty with the comments of who else? Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and Maria Elvira Salazar, who claim that presidential candidate Nasruddin Mohammed is a puppet of Nicolas Maduro because they trade oil and gold. However, oil and gold are prized natural resources from Venezuela and Guyana, and both countries need environmentally friendly ways and profitable means extensive to our populations so that we can become richer. In Venezuelan circles, it was often stated that similarly, Maria Corina Machado is a puppet of ExxonMobil and President Irfan Ali. So extreme polarization extends well beyond the United States into both Venezuela and Guyana, suggesting that the three countries share the American continent with identical divisions, and polarization is not one country against the other, but a political faction of each of these countries against the other political faction of the same three countries. I've spent most of the day looking on international reputable news sources on the global scale about specifics on the deployment of Marines into the Caribbean and found nothing. Vladimir Putin did not even mention the issue. Donald Trump has not mentioned any Caribbean issues either. United States commentators have spoken about relief from secondary tariffs to India regarding sale of Russian oil. China is always a topic, but Venezuela, Guyana, and the rest of the Caribbean have not been discussed. We could think that Vladimir Putin would mention any specifics on its allies, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia. No. It looks like both the United States and Russia will be able to exploit together resources in Russia, the United States, and Latin America. Probably forgetting Canada, because Canada is aligned with the losers of the European Union, which are not even invited to the table as they are part of the menu, along with Volodymyr Zelensky, who will either have to capitulate or let the war continue until Ukraine is completely dismantled. A new government of Ukraine, however, could save whatever territory could be left. In any case, the United States doesn't seem to care much on what the final borders of Ukraine and Russia will be, as it will seek rare earth and petroleum and energy and minerals and other business with both Ukraine and Russia simultaneously, while selling weapons to the Europeans as they wish to continue their war. So the United States, even though it is number two because Donald Trump said that Vladimir Putin is the boss, holds a comfortable number two. However, it would be interesting to know if China, whenever it comes into play, would challenge either of Russia or the United States. However, Donald Trump, on an interview with Sean Hannity, clearly said that it is United States foreign policy to ensure that Russia and China should not get along, because that would be the destruction of the United States. However, Russia and China are already united with the BRICS, and the rest of South America looks set to pivot towards BRICS, as it is likely that Nicolas Maduro and Lula da Silva will eventually get along again, as all the hype of last year's presidential election has winded down and the Venezuelan population has turned the page. Meanwhile, Iran, which is part of the BRICS, is actively collaborating with Venezuela in scientific and military improvements, as publicly recorded in Venezuelan ministries' communication channels of government and embassy of Iran officials, which occurred yesterday, Friday. At the same time, Putin and Trump were meeting in Anchorage, Alaska. Cooperation between Iran and Venezuela is crucial because Venezuela needs urgently to promote an image of power and dominance in the Caribbean, which are either our territorial waters or adjacent to our sovereign spaces, land and water. So international waters can also be patrolled by Venezuelan Navy because they are international not only for the United States but also for Venezuela. So Venezuela could theoretically deploy a lot more of what has already been deployed all over the Caribbean, with the advantage that the Caribbean is closer to Venezuela than to the United States. A big number of supporters of the Venezuelan opposition have clearly stated that we will defend not only Venezuela but the rest of South America if we get an invasion from the United States. President Petro of Colombia has confirmed, and Irfan Ali is too busy trying to put down the ascendancy of the candidacy of Nasruddin Mohammed. The electoral campaign in Guyana is becoming rough. Originally, I thought that it would be a civilized campaign showing the wonders of superior British colonization as opposed to chaotic Spanish colonization, which has given a picture of Venezuelan elections as chaotic and Guyana's elections pristine, and it seems that is no longer the case. There is a lot of concern in Guyana about the use of cellular phones within the poll booths because political parties such as the ruling party PPP could ask voters to take a picture of their vote and send it via WhatsApp so that they can get a bonus in their bank account, which is exactly what the Venezuelan regime PSUV has done during decades. The Guyana regime, in the electoral sense, is acting exactly as the socialist regime of Venezuela. And Nasruddin Mohammed's campaign is being boycotted by the government, and they are threatening with additional United States sanctions to businesses supporting Nasruddin Mohammed, exactly as Maria Corina Machado in Venezuela has asked for sanctions to United States oil companies doing business in Venezuela. Perhaps for that reason, ExxonMobil is becoming prudent and deciding not to apply for licenses in remaining offshore blocks different than Stabroek. And again, this is the opportunity for my recurring pitch to ESO Guyana, ExxonMobil, to return to Venezuela as it is already going into Trinidad and Tobago to produce a fantastic tri-country economies of scale of a combination of heavy crude, light crude, oil, and gas. Venezuela-Guyana territorial dispute includes the westernmost part of the Stabroek field. It is my personal preference that status quo is maintained, but Venezuela is permitted to concur at exploitation in vacant lots, as well as the construction of the binational refinery somewhere on the Pomeroon-Supenam coast, with pipelines linking to Monagas, Orinoco Belt fields. This proposal must be fantastic for ExxonMobil. Even if they don't reply to me, they know that's probably the best offer they could ever imagine. Being a major player simultaneously in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Venezuela. And since in all of these countries we are tired of politicians who involve us into wars and involve us into territorial disputes for regions that they don't take care of, I can announce that I am already resuming conversations with indigenous groups from Venezuela, which I have known due to my previous political career at WOW movement, and I have requested them to summon their Pemon and Guarao contacts in eastern Venezuela, so that eventually we can also have a say from the indigenous population of Cuyuni Mazaruni and other regions of Guyana, such as Barima Guayni. Notice that I am saying Guyana. I still think its Essequibo should eventually be given back to Venezuela if a dialogue between the presidents of both countries are successful, but that is not a priority, and I applaud candidate Asruddin Mohammed in his intention to lower the tone of the border dispute and concentrate on economics, including how to deal with gold and oil and transactions not involving United States dollars, as if he wins the presidency of Guyana, the international community will probably impose sanctions to Guyana, which should not be a concern because many countries, including Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, Libya, and along, etc., have long learned how to live with sanctions, and the BRICS are devising a new system so that we could trade in our own currencies. For example, here in Venezuela, due to mismanagement of the Venezuelan Central Bank, citizens have been using the Colombian peso in western Venezuela and the Brazilian real in southern Venezuela. And we would probably not mind in having the Guyanese dollar as a legal tender in eastern Venezuela, or the Trinidad and Tobago dollar in northeastern Venezuela. We seek a regime of exchange freely among all of our currencies, which is perfectly doable, as any Binance crypto platform can realize that you can exchange cryptocurrencies into all the currencies of all countries effortlessly. and the platform efficiently calculates exchange rates. It is not necessary to price anything in any given currency. You can price any product in the currency of the country of your choice, and you can get into Binance platform for now, and probably a lot new other platforms that will accrue over the years to transform into the exchange rate of your preferred currency. Because globalization is converging payment methods. The next 2 weeks will be interesting. It seems that the combination of Ukraine and Russia talks with the development of the Guyana presidential election will provide a clue on what will be the destiny of South America. If President Irfan Ali is re-elected, the status quo would be maintained, but he would probably face greater pressure than before to conduct business with Venezuela, as it is becoming obvious that since Vladimir Putin is the boss, Donald Trump cannot do much without consulting with Putin, and Putin is certainly promoting stability in Venezuela. So the Caribbean exercises made by the Navy could perhaps be similar to exercises in other oceans without necessarily invading. Because as we know, the drug trafficking excuse is ridiculous, as the United States economy and educational system has promoted consumption of drugs. Demand of drugs is boosted by many industries in the United States, and if they do not curb demand, they will not be able to curb supply. The President of Mexico is not pleased with this development at all, and she looks like a tough woman, even though Donald Trump says she is a charming lady. But it sounds like Donald Trump likes authoritarian and tough heads of state, which makes me think that eventually, when the public opinion of the United States starts summoning Marco Rubio, that his emphasis in invading South American countries does not succeed and does not promote any interests of the United States economy, and perhaps Donald Trump will eventually ask Marco Rubio to organize a meeting between Nicolas Maduro and Donald Trump, similar to the meeting that he just had with Putin, so that they can analyze how to untap Venezuelan gold, coltan, petroleum, and uranium resources. Venezuela, by the way, has among the best and most productive uranium mines in the whole planet. As we know, uranium is a raw material necessary for building nuclear bombs, and as we know, many countries in the planet are happy with the nuclear bomb production industry. So obviously Venezuelan uranium will be in high demand, and that is the reason why we get preferential treatment by the regime of Iran. Iran protects us from United States invasion, and Venezuela provides uranium. And as Iran develops its nuclear capabilities, Iran can also gain some leverage in their negotiations with the United States in a climate of global powers competing for the highest possible percentages of dissuasion. Welcome to the real world. We are asking for peace through strength, and Venezuelan strength is its oil, its uranium, its coltan, and its gold. And similarly is the case of Guyana. It is time for Guyana and Venezuela, regardless of who is the current president in power in either country, to unite our industries so that we can all profit from economies of scale.